in the previous video, I started to investigate the AR period reduction situation at BBD, Big Box Distributor. And if you haven't watched the previous video, this video probably isn't going to make a lot of sense. So I would advise that you go watch the other video first. Go back to the Wonderland map, or go back to the YouTube channel and find the AR period reduction situation video and watch that one, and then watch this one, so that the finance portion of the organization and management is all up in arms about the average AR accounts receivable period is what they consider out of control, and they have in fact fired the accounts receivable department and hired 3 more people to take on that responsibility, and we expect things not to change much. So based upon what happened to this point, what I thought was appropriate was to in fact go ahead and begin to investigate how some of the things have in fact changed over time. And the first thing that I wanted to look at is they're up in arms about the average accounts receivable period. So I went back and I looked at that over a 2-year time period by months. And yes, it's currently running around 53 weeks in terms of its the time that it's taking for customers to pay their invoices. And it was in fact 2 years ago, it was down around 30 days, which is more typical for an organization. So the question is, why is it that it has in fact been increasing over the last couple of years and gotten to a point where it's, from the company's perspective, the carrying costs are costing them an enormous amount of money on an ongoing basis. The next thing that I chose to look at was the average order size. In other words, the customers are in fact taking longer and longer to pay their invoices, but are they ordering more or less? And if I look at it over the last 2 years, the average order size per customer on a monthly basis is pretty much the same. I mean, it varies somewhat, but it's not actually increasing or decreasing the way that the average accounts receivable period seems to be increasing. So this sort of presents a conundrum. I mean, it causes more questions than it provides answers. So the question was, okay, what else do I then look at? So I chose to look at the average order period. In other words, what is the frequency or the period during which customers are reordering? And I found out that the reorder period is in fact getting longer and longer, in the same way that it's taking them more and more time to pay their invoices. So while it started out 2 years ago being around every 28 days they were in fact ordering additional supplies, it's gotten to the point where it's out around 48, 49 days, so that they're ordering the same quantity, around the same amount of stuff, but they're ordering it less frequently, which sort of causes me to say, well, what's really happening to the sales of this organization? And if I look at it, I find out that the organization's sales have in fact been declining over the last 2 years. So why is it that the management in the finance department is up in arms around the average accounts receivable and not up in arms beating on the sales force as to why in fact the business has been declining for the last 2 years? I mean, are they out to lunch or spending all their time on the golf course, or I don't know what they're doing. But I mean, this chart would in fact get my attention. So if I go ahead and now look at all of these together, I in fact have the AR period, the average AR period increasing over the 2 years, and the average order size is oscillating slightly, but not changing greatly. The average order period has been increasing right along with the increase in accounts receivable, the average accounts receivable payment period, though sales have in fact been declining. Now, when I look at this, when I look at lots of different data on the chart, and they all start in different places and vary to different extents, it sort of drives my mind nuts. What I really like to do to give me a better sense of things is I like to take all of the data and normalize it to its initial values, so that for each one of these items, the average AR period and the average order period and the order size, what I did was take let's start here. The initial value of this was 8. Go ahead and take that and transform that whole chart to based on 2 years ago, starting at essentially 100%, so that I can track the trends over the 2 years, and I end up with all 4 sets of data essentially on the same set of values based around starting at 100%. So that if I do this now, I can see that as the average period percentage and the average order percentage are increasing, the order size is staying relatively the same and the sales are declining. And if I look at that over the 2-year period, it's just a very different picture than looking at these graphs going in different directions, starting in different places with different values. And I actually had to plot them on 2 different scales because of the variance. But if I plot everything on a percentage basis, I can look at all 4 of, I have to ask Scott why the legend is doing that. I can plot all 4 of them on the same scale and get a sense of the relative percentage changes of multiple sets of data over a time period, and it gives me a better sense of how they relate to each other, as opposed to looking at them when they're in fact going in different directions with different scales. So based upon this, I now get a sense that the average AR period has in fact been increasing over the last 2 years. The average order size has been staying relatively constant. The period, or the amount of time between which customers reorder, has been growing at the same way that the accounts receivable average period has been growing, and sales for the organization are in fact have been declining over the last couple of years. So there are now some other things that I need to go investigate, and I will do those in the next video. So I will see, and I will try to extend the model of what's happening in this environment based upon what I find out. So I'll see you in the next video, and take care. Bye.